Hi, this is Lisa, and you are listening to I Love That Movie. This podcast is for movie lovers. It's not an unbiased opinion, it's not a straightforward review, it's just a couple people talking about a movie that they love. The format is each week I have a guest, and that guest and I discuss a movie that they love, something they're obsessed with, something they connect with. We'll talk about the plot, the director, and the actors, but we'll also talk about the personal connection my guest has with that movie. So if that sounds like something you want to listen to, keep listening.
Hey, this is Lisa, and if you want to catch up with me on Twitter, you can find me at ILTN Podcast, or I should say X. I say that every week. One of these days, I'll say the right word for it. Also on Instagram at I Love That Movie Podcast, and we have a Patreon. The show is always free, but if you want to support us on there, you can. That's at patreon.com/I Love That Movie. And if you like what you hear today, please subscribe and rate the show. It does help new listeners find us. I have a returning guest. Haven't heard you on the podcast in a while, though, Josh. How are you?
Oh, I'm wonderful. How about yourself?
Doing well. We've done episodes on, was it Aliens? We all did together, like as a group, a while
Oh my
back.
God, that was like episode 1.
Yeah,
I
it
think
was
that was
like
the
a
last
long
time I
time
was
ago.
on. Was
Well, you're back,
what year
and
was that,
I
by the
don't
way?
even know. It has to be like 2019 or 2018, something like that. It
Okay.
was like before COVID,
Man,
pre-COVID
that was
times.
forever ago.
It really was. And it was like live and in person. That was fun though. Um, but you're back. I think we did Alien and then Aliens, and then you're picking a new movie this week. And what movie is that?
It is The Road Warrior, and I believe that I've been talking about wanting to do this movie on your podcast for since episode 1, since your very first episode, and finally getting around to it.
I've staunchly
My fault.
refused. I'm just
Yeah,
kidding.
I
I'm just
hate
joking.
all of the MadMax movies. So.
No. I live with a MadMax super fan. That's Nick. In fact, both of y'all have been the Road Warrior at conventions.
Yeah, we were the Road Warrior together and got into lots of adventures.
Yeah, some we won't discuss here. um, but yeah, so if you haven't heard this podcast before, my guest picks the movie and then we talk about it basically. It's usually, well, I want it to be a movie they love. And so that makes it fun to discuss. But this week we're discussing Mad Max 2, otherwise known as The Road Warrior. This came out in 1981. And we're not a spoiler free podcast. So if you're listening and you're thinking, oh, I've never seen that before, this is your opportunity to pause, watch it, and come back. But if you're still here, here is the synopsis that I got off of Wikipedia. After avenging the death of his wife and young son at the hands of a vicious gang leader, Max drives the post-apocalyptic highways of the Australian outback, fending off attacks from nomadic tribes that prey on outsiders. Falling into an encampment led by the relatively peaceful Mike Preston, or Papagallo, is that how you say it?
Maybe it's so hard to remember.
Like remember
Because
their
they don't
names.
say people's names in the movie ever,
Okay.
or really, except for Max. So it's
Okay.
hard to, or a couple of most of the good guys in the refinery. I don't even remember what all their names are.
Okay. Well, we'll just say this. Falling
Yeah.
into an encampment led by the relatively peaceful guy, Max at first schemes to steal their oil, but soon becomes the group's reluctant defender against the hulking Humongous and his ruthless marauders. So yeah, that's essentially what happens, but we will talk a lot more about that. So Josh, when did you first watch this movie?
I want to say I was about 12 or 13. I do
Oh,
remember exactly like how we watched it and everything, but I used to spend my summers in Nebraska with my grandparents and my mom, and we would usually split time between like my grandparents' house, which was like an hour away from my mom's house. And so I was at my grandparents' house. My uncle was over, and he asked me if I had ever seen any of the Mad Max movies, and I said no. And so my grandparents, of all people, were like, "Oh, they're so crazy. We have to go. We have to go get these and watch all of them."
Wow, I don't think I knew that.
Yeah, it was such as I didn't know what I was in for until like after I watched these, and I'm like, why are my grandparents want want to
It's
watch
kind of
these?
violent
Yeah,
suggestion from your grandparents.
it's so yeah, it was surprising. I didn't really know anything about it. They just told me they're like, oh, they're great. They're you as you get through 1, 2, and 3, you just see the world get crazier and crazier each movie. And so
Mm.
we we went to the local tiny video store that they had. They had them all on VHS, so we rented them,
Mm.
watched all of them, and I'm a fan of all of the Mad Max movies. And the reason I picked Road Warrior for this podcast is that one definitely had the biggest impact on me.
Wow.
Even as a kid, when we watched all three of them, I was just
Mhm.
I was just, to me, just end to end a perfect movie, and I was
Nice.
obsessed with it. And then was also like, yeah, why are my grandparents into this? It's so strange. I had no idea, but
That's so interesting.
yeah, I want to. It would have been like the late '90s is when I saw it. I would, yeah, 12, 13.
Wow, impressionable age.
Oh yeah.
Um, yeah, so yeah, this came out in 1981, and that makes sense. You saw it on VHS. I think the first time I saw this was probably with Nick as an
Oh yeah.
adult.
Was that when
And
we
that
were planning our costumes? And
probably, yeah. Like Nick, he loves post-apocalyptic movies, I would say. Like, and he loves like cyberpunk and things like that. So like,
Fallout, yeah.
yeah. So he like introduced me to this, and I was kind of a brat about it. I was like, I'm not gonna like this. Like right off the bat, I was like, I don't like this kind of stuff. But then I watched it with him, and I really liked it. I was like, oh, I've been kind of too hard on this genre as a whole, and like there's a lot here. So I'm proud to say I like it now. And yeah, so I saw it, I guess, on DVD or on streaming, but not in 1981. So, um, this will be an interesting conversation between two opposite ends of the spectrum. But I did want to share a couple of quick facts that I had about the film. The first one being that Mel Gibson only has 16 lines of dialogue in the entire film.
And multiple of them are something like I'm just here for the gasoline or something.
Yeah, I only came for the
Oh
gasoline.
yeah.
I feel like that's such a trademark of like 80s and 90s action heroes, is like being a man of few words. I feel like maybe that started with, I don't know, like Clint Eastwood or something, but back in the day. But I feel like especially in the 80s and 90s, like very masculine main characters that don't say a lot, but they
Yeah.
do
Yeah,
commit a lot of violence.
that does make sense. I was wondering because I say, yeah, I actually didn't think of it that way. But I kept looking at the movie, eh, and I've read a lot of people say the same thing too. That, I mean, the movie could easily work as a silent film. I mean, the plot is
Oh,
so
interesting.
straightforward and everything, and
Hmm.
it really doesn't really need a lot of explanation. They do such a good job visually of showing you, everything that's happening, and it's not a rocket science type of story, but it easily. I mean, if they had, I mean, I don't know if there were the circumstances around how every yeah all the circumstances around how the movie was made, but yeah, it easily they could have made it a silent movie and it would have made perfect sense.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. Like, I guess because I hadn't watched this in a while, I didn't remember that there were so few lines of dialogue, but it really makes sense why in Fury Road, which is kind of more clear in my memory, I think, than this movie sometimes, but the Max doesn't speak a lot. And it's like, well, I guess he never did. So
Yeah,
makes sense. The second thing I had is that the dog used in the film, whose name simply Dog, was obtained from a local pound, trained to perform in the film, and because of the sound engines upset him, He was fitted with special earplugs, and after filming was complete, he was adopted by one of the camera operators.
That's
But
so sweet.
wow, what a
I
huge risk to take with an animal actor too, to like just pick one up
yeah,
from the pound.
and I wonder if it's just because the movie scene. I don't know if it was just not very big in Australia or their budget, but I'm like the dog character, because I've heard that same thing too, where they adopted a dog and kind of haphazardly trained him to be in the movie. But I was wondering if there just wasn't either a trained dog available, or if the dog was written in last minute or
Hmm.
something. I have no idea. But I also did hear about the earplugs. I always, every time I would see
Aw,
him like in the car, I just imagine his little pup earplugs. Somebody putting in his little
that's so
pup
cute.
earplugs. They said he was terrified and would like pee and stuff
Oh,
if it was too loud. Poor dog.
poor thing. Yeah, I mean, the vehicles in this are very loud. So that kind of makes sense. Um, well, we could talk a little bit about the director of this movie, who is what's his name?
George Miller. Yeah.
George Miller.
Yeah.
I was like, why did that
Very
jump to my
interesting
mind?
filmography career.
Yeah, I mean, he's got like a lot of different films under his belt that you wouldn't necessarily put in the same category as Mad Max, but yeah, he does a really good job, obviously, and has a new movie coming out soon. So
Yep, very excited for that one too. But yeah,
yeah,
his filmography is just, yeah, it's bizarre.
yeah,
It's
I loved Babe. I mean, I'll say
yeah.
that as a kid, I absolutely adored that movie. So,
Didn't he
but
direct I actually didn't look this up before. I should have looked it up. Didn't he
oh
direct
no.
Lorenzo's Oil too?
Let me look right
I,
now at his filmography, and with the magic of editing, it will
oh
seem
yeah.
like I just looked it up. Oh no, it's right here, Lorenzo's Oil. Um, yeah, that was
He did a
back
bunch of different
1992.
movies.
Truly, yeah, but the one probably that I remember the most, other than this one, is Babe, and then Happy Feet. I remember my uncle called Happy Feet Crappy Feet. He didn't like
Oh,
it.
Crappy Feet. Oh, that's
Yeah.
really funny.
I'm like, that's awful. But yeah, so he's had a very interesting filmography. And then also, as far as the cast goes, to be 100% honest, Mel Gibson's probably the only one I recognize. I don't know about you, if you recognize a few names from it or not.
Oh, not really. Yeah, I was trying to think. I know I forgot the name of the actor who plays the gyrocopter captain. I've seen him and stuff before.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, everyone else, yeah, Mel Gibson was really the breakout the only one I really remembered, because he's the
Yeah.
only one who really got famous off of those movies.
Right, like, I feel like it's the charm of these movies is they kind of are like a lower budget action flick with
Yeah,
just like a really, really good idea. And yeah, I imagine this is what propelled Mel Gibson to fame because I mean, he is super young, especially in the first one.
yeah, oh yeah, yeah. It was definitely original Mad Max that, yeah, or yeah, definitely a combination, yeah, Mad Max and Road Warrior that really made him take off.
Yeah. Well, since we don't know a lot of the other actors, we'll kind of go on, I guess, to the to your some of your favorite scenes from the movie.
Well, the one that always sticks out to me is, at the very end of the movie, you have the big car chase, and
Hmm.
there are so many, amazing car chases in movies, and that the scene with the tanker is just so iconic,
Yeah.
and it's just been borrowed and used for so many other movies, satires, parodies, just everything. It's just tons of stuff was inspired by that chase scene. And a lot of people talk about you know famous movie car chases like
Hmm.
Blues Brothers, Vanishing Point, Bullet, all these. But yeah, Road Warriors, just that is just the coolest chase scene ever. Especially favorite scene of all time is probably at the very end where Lord Humongous is kits his nitrous on his car to try to run into the AT or to the big rig, and they run
Hmm.
into each other, and the car just shatters into a bazillion pieces, and it's just so funny. Just the comedic timing in that movie is just it's so funny and
Yeah.
just over the top ridiculous. And I want to say that one of my favorite scenes was very early on in the beginning, and it was the one my grandparents actually told me. They were like, "Oh yeah, this is going to be." They were like, "Get ready for this. It's so funny." But at the beginning when Mad Max runs up to the runs into that 18 wheeler with and he's filling up with gasoline, and they have the standoff with some of the biker gang, but he opens the door to the big rig, and some like bloated dead body falls out of it. It's just it comes out of nowhere. It was really funny. Just again, the movie it's pretty serious, but it's so goofy in certain ways, and just like the right way. It's um yeah, I don't know how else to really describe it, but it's just
No, I
it's a
think
very
what you're
funny
saying,
movie.
right, I think that's why it appealed to you at a younger age too, is like it's got these like kind of serious action themes, but it's like fun enough to where it's enjoyable. Like
Oh yeah.
someone young could like get on board. I was thinking while you were talking about how like what was my first exposure to this genre? Why did I have like the opinion that I had? And I think it's because I didn't watch The Road Warrior or the original one. I watched a bunch of knockoffs
Oh
because
yeah.
I feel like this movie was so popular and in some ways other than like the giant explosions could be relatively low budget because it's just like in the desert and like they're just kind of wearing like found gear and things like that. So like in theory you could kind of make a pretty cheap knockoff, and I saw a bunch of those, and so I think that's why I didn't know what they stemmed from. One that stood out to me the most is there was this movie called The Bronx Executioner
Oh yeah.
that we watched, and it's really bad. But if you look at pictures of it, it's not even about the same thing. Like it's supposed to be about a cyborg, but if you look up like pictures from it, it kind of looks Mad Max-ish because they, just the way they styled the characters. So that's why I think I thought of those movies first and not this one. But when I was watching this, like I was thinking that a lot of the scenes in this are really, to me, now I could be remembering these wrong. That's why I'm kind of asking you, the expert. But this is kind of the template for Fury Road, right? It feels like it's most like this one.
Almost, yeah, it's just yeah, almost the same story, just blown
Mhm.
up way bigger with way more money. Or
Yeah.
just the kind of the template near the end of the movie where it's, you have a big vehicle being chased by a bunch of other vehicles. That's what George Miller, I guess, with this movie, because this was the first one that had that kind of that blueprint. Because the first one, was just there were it was just police cars chasing other cars, and then this one
Yeah.
where they were like, we're going to get this big rig and it's going to be chased with a bunch of improvised weird other vehicles, and they did the exact same thing in Fury Road, just with
Mhm.
an absurd budget and a lot more crazy cars and
Yeah, and a
people.
lot more characters too.
Yeah, I was thinking too. When you talked about how you had seen more of the knockoffs and stuff before you
Mhm.
saw this one. I actually my very first Mad Max or piece of Mad Max content that I saw as a kid, and I had no idea what it was referencing or even that it was a reference to anything. Was I was really when I was a kid I was really into that CGI show Reboot that was shown on
Oh,
ABC
yeah.
back in the
Oh, I love
early
that
90s.
show.
There was actually now that I'm thinking about it, there is a more interesting story about it, but to me at least, so there was an episode of the show called Bad Bob that was essentially the
Oh,
concept of the
Bad
show
Bob, like
was
Mad Max, yeah.
yeah, exactly. There was the concept of the show is that a game would come into they all lived in a computer, and everybody there was a CGI show. Everybody lived in a computer, and then every once in a while the user would insert a game, and then they would get brought into the game and have to beat the user in order to not be murdered. uh, funny for a kid's show. But
Yeah.
they did an
High
episode of the
stakes.
show. Yeah, yeah, extremely. And, and then yeah, there was an episode of the show called Bad Bob that was essentially the video game was Road Warrior, where they were all chasing.
Oh.
They were chasing a Megabyte, who was the bad guy, the main bad guy of the show, got transformed into a big rig, and so they were all chasing him on MadMax cars and stuff. And what the interesting thing about that was definitely the first piece of Mad Max related anything that I ever saw. I had no idea what it was, but I later learned that the one of the artists who worked on that show, apparently he did some interview years after. I mean, where apparently after they made the episode, he was obsessed with Mad Max. Apparently, like
Oh,
really
really?
big super fan, and would send George Miller like fan letters and stuff. But
Wow.
apparently, he mailed an episode or a copy of the episode to George Miller, who at some point actually watched it. And this guy's name was Brendan McCarthy, by the way. And so apparently he liked it and
Mm.
reached out to him, and so they started talking about Fury Road, what at the time was not called Fury Road.
Whoa.
And this is like back in the, I want to probably the early 2000s or late 90s. I'd have to look that up again. But
Wow.
he actually like brought him out, had interviews with him, and he actually is credited with co-writing Fury Road.
Oh my God, that's a really cool story. I did
I
not
was
know
like,
that.
all these fandoms I was into, I was just kind of turned in on each other. I had no idea. So that was really cool. I'm favorite cartoon show or when I was a kid, and favorite movie series all kind of tied together later on. And
Well, there's one more franchise I feel like that this has needs to thank this movie, and that's Aliens. I mean, I feel like the feral child is like the template for Newt.
oh yeah, I could definitely see that. That's funny.
Like, because
Yeah, that,
Aliens came out in like 86 and this was 81. I don't know, like their look is kind of similar. I mean, she's
yeah,
not feral, but it just kind of reminds me of that theme of like, you know, in the second one, I guess they're making the character a little bit more family oriented. And I feel like they kind of did
hmm.
that with Sigourney Weaver's character too.
Oh yeah, yeah. I could absolutely see that. And in the 80s, there was that obsession with like sewer children and like
Yeah, I don't know what that was about. It was either that or the mob. It felt like every movie had the mob in it somehow. It's like,
mhm.
what, this is unnecessary, but yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't know what other movies could have had a character like that, but Mad Max is probably the earliest one that I can think of that I've ever seen.
yeah. And I mean, it really goes off the rails with like the feral children in like the third one, but
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah, the third one. Yeah.
there visually there's things I like about the third one though.
Oh, there were tons of I love I love a lot of a part. It just kind of meanders later on, but and I think the last time we saw that was when we went to the trilogy showing at the Draft House, and
Yes.
by the end when it does start meandering like that, you're like, I've already been here for like 6 hours, and
That's true.
but yeah,
I
there
forgot about that.
the third one, interesting from what I read, wasn't even written as a Mad Max movie, and then George Miller had somebody somebody who was related or was a friend, I forgot, who died, and so he didn't handle a lot of the direction. I guess he only directed the action scenes in the third one,
Oh,
which
interesting. Didn't know
it
that.
makes sense why it's a little more disjointed than the other
Yeah.
ones. But
It's
but
kind of
yeah,
like the third one started to sort of forget what we liked about that first one. But like by the time we get Fury Road, like obviously that's much closer to the original while still being visually very different, you know.
oh yeah, yeah. They just amped everything up from Road Warrior and just yeah, they just took that exact same template and ran with it, which I
Is
love.
is there a connection between Humongulus and any other characters, or is he just like the bad of this movie? I can't remember.
Well, again, it's interesting to me. Not sure who else. Because I know as a kid I was like, there's this this weird character. They're showing that he's clearly, been, radicalized by the wasteland, really. And he's, all burned up and stuff. And I, I thought it was an interesting, the just kind of mysterious character. You really don't know about his origin or anything, but they actually did intend to make him, or to tie him into another character, like an actual named character from the first movie. And so in the first movie, Mad Max has a partner named Jim Goose, who dies in the movie, or it suggested that he's either like, I forgot. It's been so long since I've seen the first one, because I remember you see like his burned up body, but he gets run off the road by one of the gangs, and they set his car on fire, and then you see like a part of his like burned hand or something later in the movie. And what they had intended when they were initially making Road Warriors, that Humongous was supposed to be his old partner.
Oh, like come
And
back
that's
and
why
being a
they
bad guy.
showed him. Yeah, exactly. Because that was why he was supposed to be all burned up, because he got burned up in the first movie and all that. And so it was supposed to be him versus his old buddy. But they decided not to go that route, really, because I guess George Miller thought that not enough people had seen the original Mad Max to know that there was that connection, which is why in the US, they didn't call it Mad Max 2, they just called it the Road Warrior, which actually confused me as a kid when I was.
It confused me looking this up. So the thing is, I guess Americans hadn't really seen that first one, is what you're saying?
Yeah,
This is like their
it
first
wasn't
introduction? Oh,
it
I didn't
wasn't
realize
like
that.
super widely released, and I guess they just weren't confident that enough people had seen it.
That makes sense. They're like, this is a really good idea, but what if we give you a budget, you make another one, and so in doing so, he like kind of rewrites a little bit of it, doesn't tie it too much to the first one, so that newbies can come in with fresh eyes. Okay, I think I probably knew that at one time and forgot that fact. That's interesting. What are some other scenes that you really liked from the movie?
Oh, none of them. It's a terrible movie. I'm just
Terrible. Just
the scene with the feral kid, where he's throwing his razor boomerang, and
oh yes.
he kills the guy's lover, boyfriend, or whatever. But the one where I forgot the name of the character, but he's like the announcer who talks for Humongous when they're sitting outside the little refinery base. But when he throws it and the guy tries to catch it and he chops all his fingers off, and then all his friends and everything are just laughing at him. I was like, man, your friends suck.
Yeah,
but I guess that's how
intense.
it is in the wastelands. And
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, these movies really, like you said, visually, they like influenced a lot of films going forward. It's like when you think of Desert Wasteland, you think of this, or like there's that event that our friend Jesse goes to every year, the Wasteland Weekend. It's like,
oh yeah,
I just think of stuff like this.
I remember when we were making these Mad Max costumes and stuff, I was like, oh, now I have to go to Wasteland Weekend and everything. But yeah, this movie definitely solidified. I don't. Were there movies before that had that same sort of desert style, or did Road Warrior really kind of cement that type of like biker leather, wasteland type of look?
The only thing I can think of is like those Death Wish movies, but they were not apocalyptic.
Yeah.
But it was like a kind of a similar-ish plot of like somebody's family is attacked and then that person becomes like this kind of wandering vigilante.
Oh yeah.
I feel like that was kind of the first thing like that, but then Road Warrior is refreshing because it's not taking any sort of like the first Death Wish, I'm just going to be honest, has some problems because in retrospect, it's kind of racist and I don't know. If you watch it, it's pretty intense. But I think with Wasteland or with Road Warrior, it's removed from anything like that. It's not taking like a specific place. I mean, even though it's in Australia, it's more of like a fantasy version of like what happened to this guy. And then, it's a similar thing too. I think the in Death Wish he was a cop, but I can't really remember exactly. But I guess that was probably the first thing like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think the only other thing I could think of where they had, gang, and it wasn't really Wasteland, but where they had gangs with these kind of, ratty, weird, homemade looking, Wasteland-ish outfits were, like something like the Warriors.
Oh yeah. Man,
But
I love
yeah,
that
there wasn't
movie.
really much else I could think of before that like I mean this movie definitely like laid down like this is your Wasteland template. This is what your outfits are going to look like in the Wasteland. So um
Interestingly, Mad Max came out in 1979, and so did The Warriors.
oh really? Oh, the first one
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, that is interesting. I guess they didn't. Who knows how if they copied anything from each other.
I feel like something happens certain years where everyone is getting influenced by similar things, and it's like not so much that they're copying each other, but that it kind of speaks to the time and like the aesthetic of the time. I mean, I think maybe there was a lot of fear in the 70s around like youth,
Youths, yeah.
urban
Oh,
stuff, gangs. Like
yeah.
I think because of what was going on at that time, it kind of started to bleed into like fantasy as well. But The Warriors is another great movie. I would totally talk about that one too. I love it. But yeah, interesting. What okay, this is kind of a different kind of question, but what about this movie specifically, like the aesthetic of it, or like what do you think like pulled you into these films so much?
It was definitely the cars. I'd always been into car movies when I was a kid, and by this point, by the time I watched it, 12 or 13, my big movie car, I was this was like a passing of the torch moment for like child me, because I was
Yeah.
like like the golden like the the my absolute favorite movie car was always the DeLorean from Back to the Future,
Heck
and
yeah.
I was obsessed with that car. But then when I saw Road Warrior, Mad Max's car, I was like, I want this car. I like this is the coolest looking thing I've ever seen. It's just so badass. And so the cars, the really kind of rundown homemade nature of all these crazy vehicles, that's what really sucked me in. And then the fact that that movie, I mean, was made in 1981 with no CGI, and you just see all these
Yeah.
cars driving around everywhere, and just it just looks it's visually just very impressive to
I'm
watch. You
gonna
just get a great sense of scale and everything.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask you a dumb question. What kind of car does he drive?
It's a Ford Falcon,
Okay.
which we don't have in the U.S. And there's a
Oh.
they had actually, when they were making this movie, they wanted it might have been the first movie too. I don't recall. I know the first movie was made like same amount of money as like a Diet Coke or something. It was made for like no money. But the they were wanting to, for his car, they were actually wanting to use a Ford Mustang, but I guess they couldn't afford to import one for the movie. So they ended up using a Ford Falcon, which is an Australian kind of like a Ford Mustang. But
Oh,
I
interesting.
and yeah, and I thought it was fascinating because that car is just, it's so unique to that movie. And since we don't, have that specific car in the US, it just looks very exotic and very just very memorable because it's just something you don't see every day. And
And when you say that, do you mean like the way the engine is like on the outside of the car?
oh,
Or
that part's not real, quote
oh,
unquote, the big
okay.
supercharger, but just the actual like the silhouette, the body of the car
Oh, I
is
see.
just
Okay.
it's just not a car that we have in the US. So it, to me, was interesting just because I, as a kid, going, I don't recognize this car.
Yeah, you're
Yeah,
like,
this is
"This
something
looks
I've never
really
seen
cool.
before.
I've never seen it." Yeah. Oh, okay. Thank you for explaining that. As somebody that doesn't know a lot about cars, sometimes when car people say, "Man, this car is really cool," I'm always curious. I'm like, "What
Oh,
about it?" So that really helped.
yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, of course. And so the thing you're talking about that sticks out of or the engine sticking out of the hood, that's
Uh-huh.
supposed to be a supercharger, which is something you bolt onto your engine that'll force more air into the
Oh,
engine and
okay.
makes more power. But interestingly, in the movie, there's several times where he has like a switch to, because
Mhm.
the supercharger in a car is, it's driven by a belt that's connected to your engine.
Oh,
So when
okay.
your engine's running, this belt's turning, and the faster you go, the faster this belt turns, the more air it's sucking in. It's several times in the movie. There's a point he has a switch that'll turn it off, which is not something that you can do with an actual supercharger.
Oh,
I,
really?
as somebody as a car person, I find it very funny. But and when they were filming the movie, they even said that too. They were like, we wanted this to like be like a cool gadget, even though that we know that it's not gonna, that's not something that exists in real life. So they said that they were, when they would show them like switching it on and off, they were actually just starting and stopping the engine of the car.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Wow. Thank you for that explanation. That's very helpful.
Oh,
Um,
no
I
problem.
I was looking again through like some of the quick facts, and I was talking about movies that it may have influenced. Apparently, James Cameron said that this is one of his influences behind the Terminator. And in Terminator
Oh,
2, John Connor's dog is actually named Max.
oh yeah, his name was Max. I did not
Yeah.
make that connection at all.
No, I
That's
mean, I didn't
interesting.
watch the Terminator and think this movie, but that's very cool. Love that.
I guess it taught he's, or I guess showed that you can make, I mean, you can make a crazy movie with not very much money.
That's
It,
true, and also futuristic.
yeah.
Very cool. Um, there was another thing that I saw. Contributing to the cost of production, it was the most expensive set ever constructed for an Australian film. The desert compound built in the desert of Broken Hill, New South Wales, Australia. The producer also boasted the largest explosion ever created for an Australian film, which destroyed the above set. Wow.
They did a great job blowing that set up though. That was a,
Yeah,
but yeah, that set's so cool. I mean,
I know.
the fact that, I mean, and as far as what's really cool, specifically about how, the fact that they built all that is, they have all these shots of cars, just going all around it, all inside the compound and everything too, and you can just
Mhm.
see these like long tracking shots and see that everything is real and that all exists, and it's
Yeah.
very immersive. And it a lot of that stuff, I mean, it's constructed, where they use like a bus as their door, and
Mhm.
everything. It's just stuff that you could actually see, you could imagine would be practical in, a wasteland type of apocalypse environment. It's other than, wasting gas by shooting flamethrowers and stuff. And
I just thought of another influence that I wasn't super crazy about, but was also post-apocalyptic. Do you remember the Chronicles of Riddick?
oh yeah, like Pitch
The first
Black.
one was called Pitch
Yeah,
Black. Yeah, I remember
yeah.
like being like meh on that. So that's why I would make like assumptions. I'm like, oh, I don't like that in this other awful movie that
Oh right.
came out. Um, and I
Yeah,
was like,
that.
I must not like this genre at all, which is just silly. And like that's I like to I'm not trying to put this genre down or anything like that. I'm sharing it because I think sometimes we get an idea about an entire genre based on one or two examples, and we need to remember that there's many examples often, and like don't let that stop you from discovering something new basically.
Oh yeah, very true.
Yeah, but you're right. I think you were saying that the world that George Miller created was very immersive, and you can tell it has like a big budget, and it's very interesting and kind of inspiring, and I do feel like that's like one hallmark of his movies, and part of why I liked Fury Road so much is like it really does feel like he does do a really great job with the sets. And obviously, like you mentioned before, this is pre CGI in 1981, and yet it looks so good. And like, I think I'm kind of a sucker for real effects. So completely agree with you there.
Yeah, it's super cool. I mean, the fact that they're able to build all of that, build all these insane cars, and film in the middle of the desert,
Yeah.
really. And it's just yeah, it's just very very unique. And I think what helps it be a lot more immersive too is there again, like we were talking about, there's not very much dialogue, so you don't have these like really long exposition dumps or anything.
Very
You just
true.
you kind of make your own assumptions and make your own story around the how they got to this point exactly and everything, and then like they don't. It's a lot of showing, not telling.
Yeah. I feel too like in the same way that Star Wars is very, obviously it's in space, but they ground it with using items from our world, right? That are oftentimes kind of retro or nostalgic, like especially in all the Star Wars movies, like if you really break down like their outfits and their weapons, there's stuff that, from our world, right? Like there's that funny machine that's actually just like an ice cream machine, and like the the lightsaber hilts were like camera equipment,
Oh
and
yeah,
stuff like that. And I feel like that's such a good way to like make something that is futuristic or is kind of like outside of our experience feel so grounded. And that's probably another reason why these movies, like you said, they don't have to give you a bunch of explanation. They just like give you kind of visual hints about what might be going on, and like almost by not giving you all the information makes it more mysterious and interesting, but
yeah,
relatable
exactly.
enough to where you can kind of fill in the gaps yourself.
Yeah, because sometimes when you have a movie with an interesting visual or something, and when they try to go a little too far in explaining it, and you're like, well, now that sounds stupid.
Yeah, like they're like, oh, 100 years ago, blah blah blah, and you're like,
Yeah,
eyes are glazing over because like it's not realistic anyway. Like we don't need it to make perfect sense.
yeah. They just at
It's
the beginning
fun.
they're like, all there was a war, there's no oil, everything shut down, and just fill in the blanks yourself.
Yeah, it's like we don't know if it was like we know it's a war, we don't know if there what other reasons or what the war was about, or yeah. You just know that things suck now and oil is scarce. That's all you need to know. And
Yeah.
that's good enough. Yeah. What's the name of the guy that has like all the feathers on him and the red mohawk?
Oh,
Or does he have a name? You might have been
it's some
alluding to
like
that
three
earlier.
letter. It's like some like 3 letter name. Like the main sort of antagonist besides
Yeah.
Humongous. Yeah, very very funny character. I don't remember the name though. Let me
Yeah,
Google
their
that
names
real
aren't
quick.
that important.
I don't think
But
they might, if they say his name, it's probably only like once in the movie. I've seen this movie a million times. I never remember.
but
I'm
he
just looking
kind
it
of
up real
reminds
quick.
me of like the War Boys a
Oh,
little bit.
Wes. I knew it was a three
Wes.
letter name.
Wes,
Wes
okay.
is yeah.
Nice.
The character is just so over the top. It's
Hmm.
like all of the crazy eye looks he gives are just so funny, and especially
Yeah.
at the end of the movie when he jumps up on the Max sends the 4-year old kid to go get the shotgun shell, and he pops up over the hood and right before they crash into Humongous. But it's just so over the top funny.
Yeah. I also think that Mad Max's entire look like is very iconic, like the sawed-off shotgun and the brace, which is like one carryover from the first movie. But like if you didn't watch the first movie, you wouldn't know how he hurt his leg, but you don't really
or why
need
he's
to.
or why Max is mad even.
Yeah, that's true. We don't even know why he's mad. Why is he so mad? Yeah, you have to watch the first one to know that. But regardless, he just comes across as like this cool guy wearing all leather with, the leg brace and the gun, and it's just neat. You
Yeah,
don't
it
even need
is.
all the other stuff.
Yeah, the costume was perfection. Like that was
Yeah.
yeah, really really. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to like imagine them putting this together, and not knowing that it's going to be this you know iconic look that 40 years from 40 years on, like people still vividly remember.
Yeah. I was reading too that like that Mel Gibson influenced some of the look too, like the little nick in his eyebrow and stuff like that, like kind of
Oh,
making him look more rough from the first one.
oh, nice. Oh, I guess they weren't going hard enough for him as far
I
as
guess so.
the
Or maybe
aesthetic.
he just wanted to have some influence, who knows? Or maybe he made that up. I actually don't know. But
That makes sense.
yeah. I remember when y'all were putting those costumes together too. That was really fun.
Yeah, unfortunately I burned Steph out of MadMax during that endeavor because I was watching this movie
Like on
all the time.
repeat.
Because yeah, Nick and I were really like trying to be accurate. So he has like a bunch of tools all over his outfit. Which when we were looking up like what all the tools were, we're like, oh, it actually makes sense. Like one of them was this weird thing. It was also funny because I was telling Steph, I was like, I need more pictures of Max's butt so I can see all the tools he has on his back. But he has stuff like I mean, he's got like wrenches and knives, and one of them was this weird thing, and both Nick and I were like, "What the hell is this?" And it's a tool, I guess that is native to Australia and is
Oh,
used to
really?
open. And it was some weird. Nick actually made one because we couldn't find them or find the real ones.
Oh,
He made like a cast one that he gave me a copy, or he gave me one of the ones he made. But it was like it's meant for opening fire extinguisher or fire hydrants in Australia,
interesting.
which I was like, that makes sense to have, in
Yeah,
the apocalypse, if you run
in
into
the
a fire
bush.
hydrant,
Yeah.
you can open it up. It's
Seems like lots of things were flammable.
yeah, you're gonna want
Nice.
water. But yeah, we
Y'all went hard. Yeah, I
yeah, we
remember.
identified every little piece of that costume, and so it's hard, yeah, going back sometimes and watching it, for the fun of it, because I was like, oh yeah,
It
I'm
was
not in
serious
research
business.
mode anymore. And
That's really
we're not
cool.
putting that outfit on and rolling around on the patio outside to scuff up the leather and
You have
oh,
to be
cosplay.
dedicated. Yeah. Yeah, I remember Nick like one of the memories of him wearing that outfit is we went to Alamo. I think it was for like that Michael Jackson Thriller party that they used to have around
Oh yeah,
Halloween.
we were like, why are you Mad Max?
And Nick was
Why
like
not?
dancing around and the little wrench was swinging around. I remember this like mom grabbing her kid like, let's get out of here. Like I guess because like his outfit, like if you don't know what it's from, it just looks like some random guy with leather and like spikes and tools.
This
It's
is
just
some weird
kind of
fetish stuff.
intimidating. Yeah, that was funny. But yeah. What any other scenes that we haven't mentioned or any other quick or any other facts that we haven't gone over? I know it's not like you said, it's a really good movie, but it's mostly action scenes. Are there any action scenes we haven't discussed yet?
Well, there was it was near the end of the movie when they there was a it was just a kind of an I probably more like just a just another kind of anecdote about, I guess, how dangerous it was making the movie. But
Oh
there was a
gosh.
crash scene where there's a character. It's kind of a funny crash where a character he a car crashes. He's on like a motorcycle and he hits
Mhm.
the car and flies off the motorcycle, which was supposed to happen. He was supposed to hit the car, fly over the car after, and then land on the ground. But apparently he accidentally like hit his leg, or yeah, hit his legs on the car and started like
Oh my gosh.
and tumbled in a very distinct looking man. Like when you see the crash scene, it honestly looks fake. Like because he just starts tumbling end over end, but apparently that wasn't supposed to happen. And I guess he
Oh
broke
my
his
gosh.
leg or pretty badly, and yeah, it was really really injured, uh,
Ugh.
and everything. But it looked so nuts they just kept it in the movie and ran with it. And
I guess with his blessing. I also read too that like one of maybe it was that particular stunt, but there was a stunt that was so dangerous they were like, don't eat anything because for like 12
oh
hours
really?
because if you get injured, we'll take you straight to the hospital. It's like, oh
Oh
wow.
man.
Anticipating his possible need to go to the hospital. So
Yeah, all the car jump. I mean, even I know that they're not, going, 100 miles an hour down the freeway, but that's still you have like, dozens of these, moving vehicles and everything. It's just
mhm.
got to be logistically so difficult to keep all that
I know.
together. And I mean, because there was a scene where they like grab. I don't know if this was. I'd have to look up to see if that was on purpose or not. But it was just so nuts looking where they like grappling hook one of the cars grappling hooks the truck at the end of the movie, and then
Mhm.
it like screws up, and it's the truck starts pulling the car, and the car like flips over, and then that's just being drug all over the place and flipping, and I was like, it looks really violent. And I'm wondering if there were people in that car when they were doing this, or
Yeah.
was this supposed to happen? And just another one of those where they're like, oh well, it didn't expect that to happen, but it looks awesome, so
Yeah,
leave
they're
it
like, it
in.
looks cool, so it's fine.
Yeah, just all these cars just brushing up against this big semi, and it just seems so dangerous.
Truly, truly.
But I think that it just adds to the stakes in the movie. It's so intense just because you know that all of these things are, actually happening. These cars are running into each other and crashing and jumping over stuff and everything. And oh,
Yeah.
I did
Go
think
ahead.
of one other weird thing that I thought was funny. When they were filming the gyrocopter stuff, they used an actual gyrocopter to
Wow.
fly around, and there's a scene where Mad Max is taking this gasoline or diesel to the tanker so he can take the tanker back to to the refinery so they can escape with the gasoline. But there's a scene where he runs into the gyrocopter captain again, and he flies him to the tanker. And there's a scene that's really, really quick. They show both of them in the gyrocopter flying, and then that's it. But
Wow.
apparently, the gyrocopter can't carry two people, like weight wise. Two people would be too
Oh.
heavy to do it. So they made a doll and like just kind of like strapped it into another seat to make it look like it was Mel Gibson in there too. And
That's funny. Do you feel like you can tell in that scene or no?
it's so quick.
Oh,
Yeah, you
gotcha.
really couldn't tell, and you can only see it from the back. So I mean, they they did it on purpose. They filmed
Yeah.
it that way definitely on purpose, so you really couldn't tell. But really, the only way you could even guess is, I mean, you could see that this individual is not moving at all.
That's pretty funny. Well, that's pretty cool. Okay. Well, if that was kind of the last couple of big things that you had, I guess I could ask you the last two questions then.
Yeah,
And they are,
have at
the
it.
first one is, you've kind of summarized it, and I've even dug into like a little bit about why, but if you had to summarize, um, why do you think you keep coming back to this movie? Why do you love it so much?
I just like seeing all of the the practical effects, all the really creative sets and vehicles, costumes. It's the movie's not very long. It's pretty brisk. There's not really don't have to put a lot of thought into it. It's just a very fun movie. Very I love the visual style of it, the desert apocalypse and everything, and all the rat rods and cars and stuff that they made for it, and it's just, yeah, very kind of just a very tightly paced action movie that I
Yeah.
like too. It's
Absolutely. Well, if you had to pitch it, which it could be similar to what you just said there, but what would you tell someone that hasn't seen it before?
I would say let's see how, yeah, if I was trying to get someone to watch it, I'd just say yeah, older movie, so everything in the movie is real. That's you
Yeah.
see a lot of cool cars, you have some neat outfits, or yeah, interesting outfits, I'll say. It's just kind of, yeah, crazy goofy take about the apocalypse. And
Yeah. I think you nailed it. Awesome. Well, thank you again, Josh, for coming on, and appreciate having you back and hope to have you back soon.
oh yeah, of course, yeah, hopefully it won't be another 5 years. That was my
Of
fault. That
course.
was all my fault, by the way. I kept saying,
No
"Oh, I
worries.
want to do this movie," and then never following up. And we'd like go on vacations and be like, "Oh, I want to." Yeah, when we're done with this, I need to record this movie, and then not follow up again.
That's
But
okay. Doors
yep,
always open.
awesome. Well,
Awesome.
thank you
Thanks
very
again.
much for having me.
For sure.